These are the adventures of a temporarily out of work wife and mother, and today we're making meatloaf, homemade mashed potatoes, and fried cabbage. And by we, I mean me and my sunshine. Yep, I got that boy in the kitchen. When it's time for him to be out in this world by himself, he is going to know how to feed himself. And when he becomes a husband and father, he won't have any problem cooking, cleaning, or working to take care of himself, his wife, and his children. So, gloves on, I directed him to all of the ingredients that he would need to mix up his meatloaf. While he did that, I chopped up all of the vegetables. He needed a little help getting into the ground beef packets. One of the most important things about getting busy in the kitchen is getting used to using the tools, particularly the sharp objects. With that handled, I went back to peeling my garlic, rinsing and slicing it. The ingredients that I had him gather included the garlic powder, onion powder, lemon pepper seasoning, the Italian seasoning, the tomato paste, barbecue sauce, Worcestershire sauce, and A1 sauce. Oops, I almost forgot. Breadcrumbs and brown sugar. All of these ingredients are added to taste or to visual, I guess, because you certainly can't taste it while you're mixing it. I told him to sprinkle until his ancestors said stop, but he still needed me to take a look. And with a little nudging from me, he proceeded to add all of the seasoning that was necessary. And back to the vegetables I went. So in that meatloaf, we're going to have some green peppers, some onions, some mushroom, and garlic. And for our fried cabbage, we're going to have all of those same vegetables. And while he added the tomato paste, I finally diced the garlic and brought that over and added it to the bowl. When we ran out of my favorite tomato paste, we switched to the can. And that required a small lesson on how to properly use a can opener. The can opener goes on top of the can, not on the side, people. So we used about half of the can of the tomato paste, about 2 tablespoons of barbecue sauce, 1 tablespoon of A1, and 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, 2 teaspoons of brown sugar. And while I finished up the garlic, green pepper, and onions, I had him thoroughly rinse the mushrooms. I let them dry partially, and then I diced those up as well, and we added those to the mixing bowl. While all of that was going on, I had him putting back all of the supplies. And while he mixed up the meatloaf, I started in on the cabbage. I always remove the first few leaves from the cabbage as well as the core by cutting the cabbage in half and then cutting out the triangle pieces that correspond to where the core is located. I monitored the meatloaf mixture and added a few more seasonings as was necessary, and then showed him how to line a loaf pan with parchment paper so that the meatloaf won't stick to the pan. Of course, I had to show him how to properly shape the meatloaf as well, so that it's not falling apart and it cooks all the way through. Lesson complete, it was time for him to put that meatloaf in the oven. The oven was preheated on 375, and of course, we covered it with foil. And yes, at this big age, my poor baby is still scared that he's gonna burn himself.
You got it. Put it in there. What's wrong with you? Why you acting like that? You moving so slow.
So now back to this cabbage. While I finished slicing it up, I had him thoroughly rinse the red potatoes for the mashed potatoes. And then it was time for a lesson on peeling potatoes. He successfully peeled several of them without peeling himself, but then he had to leave and go to basketball practice, so I finished up. To boil my potatoes, I sliced them in about 1/4 inch pieces and then I diced them, rinsed them thoroughly, and allowed them to soak so that I can remove as much starch as possible. Fill my pot about halfway with hot water and then put those potatoes in that water on the stove to boil. When I'm pairing potatoes with beef, I like to use beef broth in my water. When I'm pairing it with chicken or anything else, I use chicken broth instead. Well, you know, I use better than bouillon. Once my potatoes have come to a boil, I turn them down to simmer for 20 to 30 minutes, testing the tenderness until done. Drain them, and then I add butter, sour cream, usually heavy whipping cream, but this time I didn't have any, so I use milk, which works just fine. I season to taste with garlic powder, onion powder, lemon pepper, and steak seasoning. And once that's all well incorporated, I get a clean spoon, give it a taste, and add additional seasonings as necessary. Sometimes I do add a little salt because salt is necessary in potatoes. I return the lid to the pot and put it on low to keep it warm. And then it's time to dress our meatloaf. I think I forgot to film checking on the meatloaf and draining some of the rendered fat off after about 45 minutes. And then I returned it to the oven for an additional 15 minutes. And now I am mixing the remaining tomato paste, some brown sugar, onion powder, garlic powder, lemon pepper seasoning, all of the same stuff that we put in it initially, with the exception of the breadcrumbs. And that sauce is going to dress our meatloaf. It goes back in the oven for about 5 to 10 minutes so that that sauce can caramelize. And then we proceed back to our cabbage. So I like to use smoked turkey in my cabbage. I dice that up really thin so that it can be bite-sized pieces along with the cabbage. And then I brown that sausage and remove it from the pan. I add a little more oil and then I add one layer of my cabbage, all of my seasonings, garlic powder, onion powder, lemon pepper, paprika, and half of a packet of Sazon. And then I add a second layer of my cabbage and repeat those same seasonings. When my cabbage is about halfway done, I add my vegetables, my green pepper, onion, and garlic, and I saute until it's done. Once done, I add my turkey sausage back to the pan and stir until well incorporated. By the time my cabbage is done, so is my meatloaf. I cut it in half just to make sure that it's done all the way in the middle, and it is time to plate. I love adding cheese to both my meatloaf and my potatoes.